If you're thinking about moving to Australia, there's probably a few things that you're going to want to know. And having moved over here with my family during a global pandemic, there's probably a few things that I regret doing. In this video, I'm going to share with you things that I wish I told myself before I had moved to Australia. And I've roped in my friend Maz from the BAM Famalam in Australia to share with us what they would also do if they were moving over here again too. Do you want to do your corny wave again? So if you haven't seen our first part about what we would do if we would move to Australia, make sure you go and check out their channel now for our first 5 tips about moving to Australia. So Maz, what's the first thing that you wish you'd known before you had moved to Australia?
The one thing that we would probably tell ourselves, if we could say it now, is to not put so much pressure on ourselves to settle in so quickly. Because I think the kind of characters that Ben and I are, we just jump into things and we just expect it to all happen straight away. And that's definitely the attitude that we took when we moved to Australia, but we definitely didn't settle in within the couple of months that I expected. It probably actually took us a good 2-3 years to really settle in, and that wasn't something that we expected. We put so much pressure on ourselves to have our friendship sorted, have everything happening immediately, and it just doesn't work like that. So that's definitely one thing we would tell ourselves, is to just go easy and take the weight off of it a bit and not expect so much from ourselves so quickly.
Absolutely, my wife feels exactly the same way. She had a lot of anxiety about what life would be like moving over here, and I think that you have to remember that it's not just a case of you're taking your life in the UK and then just dropping it into moving into Australia. There's a lot of changes that are going to happen, and you just need to embrace those as opportunities for you when you move across.
What you were saying, Ross, is, that you actually have to change what you think, and what you were saying about Sam, I think that's a really valid point as well.
But with regards to changing your mindset, you definitely need to have a kind of like a growth mindset with regards to moving here. If you're thinking about moving to Australia, I guess most people have already failed at that first hurdle. And if you're actively applying to move to Australia, then you're already probably beating most people that have just kind of forgotten it as a pipe dream. There are going to be lots of challenges with you making your move to Australia. And I absolutely agree with Maz that if you put too much pressure on yourself with regards to settling in and making the best of your new life, you're not really going to see the good things when they're staring right in front of you. Experiencing challenges and then doing your best to overcome them, that's really what being Australian is like. And if you're able to change your mindset and think like that from an early stage, then you'll find it much easier to fit into your new Aussie life. Maz, what would you say was the hardest thing about settling into Australian life?
Probably not having those friendships already and not having that big support network that you're used to. So you might make friendships really quickly, but those kind of bonds and relationships take time to really build. When you first meet someone, you've not got the strong bond with them that you might have a year or 2 down the line. So for us, I guess we kind of expected to jump into those things. We probably didn't think it through so much, and it does take time. So you've definitely got to, if you're moving as a couple or a family, you've definitely got to like each other, because you'll probably spend a lot more time with each other, and you need to rely on each other as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. So changing your mindset is a really, really important thing that I think you need to do in order to not only adapt into Australian life, but also to assimilate better into Australian culture. Because Australians, they might sound similar and speak the same language. Everything is kind of different.
It's really funny that you mentioned, actually, Ross, about speaking the same language, because language barriers is one of the funniest things that we probably would have told ourselves about, because you might think you're speaking the same language. You might think that when you say a word that it means the same thing, and it doesn't necessarily. So a good example of this is that it's very common in England to say "all right" as a greeting, and it is just that, it's just a greeting. And if you say that to Australians, they don't really, a lot of them don't know how to react unless they're used to us English folk, but they don't necessarily know how to react and how to take that, because it's not a saying that they would use. And sometimes some of them have even thought it's been a mental health question, like, are you okay?
I actually also feel the same way, that when Australians ask you, how are you going? Hey mate, how's it going? And I'm like, It's going okay. Whereas that's how they're thinking when I'm asking them, you're right. It's just like the innocuous greeting, and whichever one you're saying, whether you're all right or how's it going, probably neither party really cares.
Yeah, it's more of a rhetorical, isn't it? And like you say, those are the alternatives in each country. How's it going? Or all right. And they mean exactly the same thing. It's just basically saying hi, and that's it. But they sound like strange questions to someone from a different culture.
And we take the mick out of them for making it seem like everything's a question when we are pretty guilty of asking our fair share of questions too. So my next tip is also thinking about questions. And my question to you would be, how much do you think all of this is going to cost? Because another thing that I would have told myself before moving over is that you are going to hemorrhage a lot of money in this process. Like a good spend, because you're changing your life for the better, but it costs a lot. Not only are you going to have to factor in the cost of all things like visas and the cost of flights, but also you've got the setup costs of moving to another country. If you've ever moved house, you'll know that you need to buy new stuff to put in that house. And if you've ever moved to a bigger house, then that costs even more. In the UK, we lived in a 3-bedroom semi-detached. It was probably around about 84, 85 square meters on a 300 meter square block of land. Now that we live in Australia, fortunately we've been able to upsize, but that means that we've probably got about 3 times the size of house on nearly 3 times the size of land. So we kind of have to now pay for 3 times the amount of stuff. Factor that also in with the fact that you're probably going to have a change in your overall life. What happens if you have a child? These are also things that are major milestones, and they also cost you more money. I reckon the best time for you to want to move over is as young as possible, because then you're only really having to worry about money issues to do with yourself. Now, this isn't something that's designed to kind of worry you or scare you or make you not want to move to Australia. But the minute you do want to move to Australia, I would say that you need to start saving as much as you can, move yourself into the mindset of that this is going to cost you a bit of money, and that will help you to prepare yourself for how much all of this is going to cost. Maz, what do you think one of your biggest money issues was when you moved to Australia?
Oh, like you, we hemorrhaged it. Again, back to what we were saying in a previous comment about we got rid of all our stuff and started from scratch. That was a massive outgoing. To be honest, we hadn't really anticipated being quite so high. I think the thing is that people move over here with $1 million in their pocket, and some people move over here with $5,000 in their pocket. And whatever your personal circumstances, you will find a way around it and you will do what needs to be done to make it happen. But it's certainly a bit more comfortable the more money you have to move over.
Yeah, as long as you find a way to live within your means and you don't base it upon this ideal Australian lifestyle from the get-go, you're probably going to find it easier just managing all of that. And thinking about this whole idea of what is the ideal Australian lifestyle, the other thing that you need to think about is that more extreme weather events and just extreme events in general are more common in Australia. Maz, haven't you experienced one of these before?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we first came over and had a look around properties, I remember Ben and I went to a new build estate, and we actually asked the people at the sales centre, you know, there's a lot of trees around here. Is this susceptible to bushfires? And to be honest, we didn't know whether we were overreacting when we asked that, because we'd seen things on the news and we thought, oh, maybe we're just being silly asking these questions. But we were definitely not silly, because we have experienced a number of bushfires here, 2 particularly bad ones where we lived. It's a really big deal. And not only bushfires, we've also experienced extreme flooding, you know, situations that we would never, ever have experienced in our lives before. They're very much real, and it's something that we didn't really know what it was really like before we moved. We didn't know whether on TV we were just seeing, you know, particularly bad incidents, but no, we weren't. It's really life. Maybe if you're in a city, it's not quite so bad with bushfires, but certainly we've experienced it, and yeah, it's something that we probably would have liked to to have known a little bit more about before we moved.
Yeah, the common thing when moving to Australia is that people are always scared about things that can kill you, but they're often thinking about things like snakes, spiders, sharks or crocodiles, when the environment is probably the thing that is most of a threat to you or your house or your home. Again, this isn't trying to scare you with moving across here, because Australia is also really well prepared for what to do in the event of these types of things. Before you buy a house, you can do flood checks, you can see what the responses would be to things like bushfires, and before you buy your home, you can feel safe with the knowledge that these things shouldn't have to affect you that much. Especially living in southeast Queensland, they're very hot on how to prepare yourself and prepare your homes for things like bushfires and for things like floods. Now, whilst they do happen, they happen in the UK. It's not something that you're going to think it's a massive problem in Australia. But the most important thing that you need to think about is it's all going to be worth it in the end. No matter what your situation is moving over here or how difficult you're going to find it, it's definitely worth it in the end.
So Ben and I have always done everything with a very gung-ho attitude. So when we moved to Australia, that was absolutely no different. So we roll with the punches and we love the life that we have now. There might be some things that, yeah, they're not perfect, but actually we enjoy them anyway. We take everything as an experience and we pretty much just embrace everything that Australia has to offer.
One of the things that we've found it easier to do is to not compare the little things with what your life was like in the UK or wherever you're coming from to what your life is like in Australia. Sometimes these things are just things that you can't really measure. My biggest takeaway from all of this before you make the move is to think about what you really value in your life and what really makes you and your family happy, and then measure that about what you can get if you're moving over here to Australia. Don't worry about the little things. The little things will sort themselves out in the end. And as long as you focus on what's important to you and work on those things, you'll definitely get the lifestyle, you'll get the opportunities and the overall happiness that you seek making the move to Australia. If you haven't already done so, why haven't you? But check out this video on the BAM Famalam in Australia to see what other things we would have told ourselves before we moved to Australia.